And once you've concluded 25 minutes or 5-minute cushion, then we respond with questions in our role as board of directors for 20 minutes. And then we get out of our role and just give you whatever feedback the judges have to give you, and that's pretty much it. So it runs about an hour, and but the only time we're out of our role is that last 10 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
Understood. Thanks for the overview.
So it's a little early, but I can read this instruction. So in this part of the competition, you're taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes, I've said all that, to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem, and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, you'll be uninterrupted. I think I said all of this already from memory. When you are finished, the judges will ask questions, then they'll give feedback on the presenting skills and, just good advice from good people. And the thing that tends to get emphasized here is that we're doing ethics from the point of view of ordinary people.
Yeah.
Even though deontology and teleology are lurking in the background, they shouldn't be in the foreground.
Yeah.
Okay? And so avoid technical terminology, avoid appeals to different faith traditions.
Yeah.
And which is not to say we're anti-faith tradition, it's just to say we want to keep this accessible to the general business audience.
Yeah.
And reading your part is not a good thing. You can use notes, of course, but just standing there and reading your contributions frowned upon.
Certainly.
During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. I'm sure all 3
We do.
have more than one.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's all the ground rules. Do you have any questions?
I've stepped out to the restroom. You might.
Yeah, well, we've got
Okay, a few minutes.
time here.
Okay.
In terms of technical terms, we do have a few scientific terms that we do explain thoroughly,
Sure.
but that might not be familiar to the layperson, that we do make a point to explain them.
That's fine.
Okay.
I think the real intent of that little warning was to not get into the philosophical weeds, so to speak.
Certainly, yeah, of course.
Hang tight for a minute, Ken.
I'm sorry?
Hang tight for a minute. We should be ready in a few.
Okay.
What was that?
I did.
Something about ready in a few.
All good. I said to hang tight for a minute.
Oh,
I'll be
hang
ready in a
tight.
few.
Okay, gotcha.
I hope it snows again.
I know, that would be so
Nice.
beautiful if it did.
Yeah.
Was it just like a light dust, or was it?
It was just barely a flurry, really. It was only for a moment. I think that it got cold enough to
Oh, okay,
snow.
got it.
So,
I'm guessing all of you have seen snow.
yes, too much.
So much this year.
Yeah.
It doesn't snow for a couple of years in England, and when it does, it snows
Right,
a
right.
lot.
I'm okay with starting if everybody else
Yeah.
is. It's 9:13 by this clock, so why don't we begin when you are ready to begin.
Okay. I'm ready. Good morning. Today we are acting as consultants for Blue Diamond Growers, an agricultural cooperative that specializes in almond production, with you as the board of directors. We will be presenting on optimizing pollination management solutions in the almond industry, offering an integrated solution that we call IBECC. Now, before introducing IBECC, we'll provide some context for the almond industry's issue with bees and why IBECC is so necessary for Blue Diamond. Today, 40% of the world's bees face extinction, a statistic that is all the more daunting when considering that 75% of our food is reliant on bee pollination in order to grow. What this means is that a world without bees significantly increases the chances of a world without humans. In response to this possible future, humans are taking action all around the world, marching in protest of various agricultural practices that are unethical in their management of bees. The increased media attention and public scrutiny regarding the decline of bees is of particular significance to those industries that use pollination services, and none are more relevant than the almond industry. Although almond trees are not native to California, 88% of the world's almonds are grown in this single state. 1.24 million acres of almonds are grown in California, which on its own creates a landmass larger than the state of Rhode Island. Almonds, moreover, are entirely dependent on bee pollination in order to grow. The California almond industry currently amounts to some $21 billion in worth and currently relies on a migratory beehive rental industry in order to pollinate all of its almond trees. Blue Diamond is the largest almond producer in the world, with 3,500 farms and employing over 900 people. The past several decades have witnessed an increasing demand for almonds in the public, resulting in an expansion of the products line at Blue Diamond, as well as a diversification of products. Some popular products being almond milk, almond flour, almond thins, etc. In 2016, Blue Diamond made $1.67 billion in global sales, this being the 5th consecutive year that Blue Diamond had broken its own record in sales, as well as topped it over $1 billion in sales overall. Now, this trend has naturally seen a corresponding massive increase in production, with a 65% increase in production since 2000 alone. While this has greatly contributed to the success of Blue Diamond, it has also put tremendous pressure on pollination services, which are required in order for almonds to grow.
Since 2010, Blue Diamond has continued to support growers, the consumer, and the state of California. The expansion of Blue Diamond reflects the whole growth of the almond industry in general. However, current practices have led to modern farming techniques which have become detrimental and a liability to the future successes of Blue Diamond. Some of these techniques include monoculture crops, native habitat and biodiversity loss, the over-reliance on chemical pesticides such as neonicotinoids, and water resource exploitation. Monoculture crops are becoming particularly problematic if you can imagine hundreds of thousands of acres of fields just devoted to one crop, devoid of any other type of native habitat or wildlife. Practices such as these have led to the endangerment of several Californian species, including the island fox, the tricolored blackbird, the California red-legged frog, and the salt marsh harvest mouse. This brings us to the ethical and financial issue facing Blue Diamond, namely beehive rentals. Because the almond tree is not native to California, it requires a migratory beehive rental system. That means that bees are trucked vast distances across the country to pollinate the almond tree. 1.6 million hives are transported in 2017 alone, with a financial cost of around $300 million. North America is the only place on Earth that uses this type of system to pollinate crops. However, in 2006, beekeepers across the world began reporting unusual declines in colonies. This became known as colony collapse disorder, or CCD. Since then, it has been found out there is a myriad of causes involved in colony collapse disorder, including habitat loss, exposure to insecticides, the varroa mite outbreak, also known as varroa destructor, or large-scale disease spread, usually as a result of bee transportation. 30% of industrial beehives were lost in 2008, with that rising to 44% in 2017. CCD, coupled with the growing demand for bees in the almond industry, has meant that prices for beehive rentals have now spiraled out of control. In 1990, a farmer could purchase a hive for rental for around $35. However, during the outbreak of CCD, that price rose to $135. Prices have continued to rise, and in 2017, on average, a farmer was paying $185 per hive. Bee transportation has also become an issue. It has similar drawbacks as it would carrying any livestock long distances, including a recent increase in crashes. This picture here demonstrates a crash in 2017 in Sacramento, which killed 1.6 million bees, about the equivalent of $80,000. Bees travel around 11,000 miles on this journey, often in unnatural confinement, covered by tarpaulin. Usually a bee will travel around 2 miles a day when it's in its local habitat. Further to the problem, bee transportation, around 16 million metric tons of CO2 are produced by the 4,000 trucks needed to carry bees to California. A study in 2009 showed that nuts are the second most vulnerable crop to pollinator loss, second only to stimulant crops such as coffee. What's bad for the bee is bad for the nut, and what's bad for the nut is also bad for the people that grow the nut.
So, why care about the bee? The interaction between the bee and the flower is the most important interaction between two organisms on the planet. Pollination is fundamental to the basics of life, and the bee is at the center of it all. However, the current system of transportation has been proven to be detrimental to the general health of the bee. Keeping bees awake at a time when they need to be resting lowers their resilience to disease and parasites. Bees become so hot that on arrival, hives must be sprayed down with water. They become so confused and agitated due to vibrations that they experience a reduction in social cohesion and ultimately cannot feed themselves or breed. Habitat loss is also a major factor, as is the widespread use of industrial insecticides such as neonicotinoids. Using synthesized chemicals in such a fashion to treat your crops is harmful not only to the bee, but to the human who consumes the almond product and the bee's honey. There are many stakeholders which hold an interest in the ethical future of Blue Diamond. Further to the bees, if these unethical practices are not addressed, many farmers will face unemployment in the next 30 years if trends continue. Beekeepers face a similar situation, and their jobs will be put at risk if nothing is done. Both of these groups must also handle pesticides on a regular basis, which can cause various cancers and premature death. Blue Diamond also holds an ethical obligation to its consumers. Due to a rise in conscientious consuming and buying locally, people have come to care about how their food is sourced. Continuing without change would make Blue Diamond's customers unknowingly complicit in bee decline. Local communities will also be affected and will be exposed to residual traces of insecticides in the soil and atmosphere for up to 5 years. The application of pesticides is often not precise, and the World Health Organization estimates 3 million cases of pesticide poisonings each year. And in terms of the ecosystem itself, vast tracts of land are devoted solely to the almond crop, and we must ensure that these biodiversities are kept resilient, reintroducing and maintaining native species of wildlife to California.
The unethical pollination management practices of Blue Diamond and of the almond industry as a whole are significantly contributing to the extinction of the bee. they are also harming other species and ecosystems with significant consequences for global health and food security. For instance, 87% of the world's plants are reliant on pollination to grow, most of this pollination being performed by bees, and many of these plants are staple crops, foods that humans rely on to survive. Moreover, the World Health Organization has found that the average human consumes less than 50% of recommended fruit and vegetable intake. If loss of the bee continues as it has, this number will only worsen, with serious implications for malnutrition, global health, and a serious food security crisis around the world. There are some legal considerations for Blue Diamond to consider in its pollination management practices. For instance, in California, bee sanitation codes stipulate that any colony that has been exposed to disease cannot be maintained, operated, or moved across state lines, but rather the bees must be killed instantly, and the hive and all associated comb must be burnt as soon as possible. While this is clearly necessary in order to stem the systemic spread of disease between colonies, it does pose a significant legal roadblock to an industry that is entirely reliant on a migratory rental beehive system. Further, in California, a food labeling law requires that all foods that have been grown in exposure to neonicotinoid pesticides must be clearly labeled as such, indicating a growing scrutiny and distrust among consumers of the use of insecticides in the agricultural industry. As we speak, the EU is trying to pass legislation that bans the use of neonicotinoid pesticides entirely. Now, if this passes, farmers will need to find alternative pest management practices and solutions on very short notice. However, this is not unique to the European Union. Across America, there have been calls for change in bee management, indicating a shift in the future of bee pollination practices. In order to circumnavigate future legal conflicts as a result of this growing scrutiny, Blue Diamond needs to adopt preemptive and proactive solutions in change. That is why, in response to the plethora of bee-related issues faced by Blue Diamond and the almond industry as a whole, we have crafted a unique and groundbreaking solution that we call IBECC, the Almond Pollination Integrated System. While also being the scientific name for the honeybee, IBECC delivers a three-tiered system, which includes the introduction of farm-managed hives, the restoration of endemic California wildflowers and other native flora, and the installment of a mechanism that we call the Rosea Tunnel.
The introduction of farm-managed hives is both the most practical and efficient solution to Blue Diamond's pollination problems. With IBECC, we'll be building low-cost beehives on the farms themselves. As little as 2.5 hives are needed to pollinate a single acre of farmland, and once up and running, the actual maintenance of a hive requires very little work. Only half an hour of maintenance is needed per week, and honey can be harvested as little as twice a year. As a business, Blue Diamond will develop greater freedom and autonomy. Having direct supervision of the insects which pollinate your product means no longer having to rely on beehive rentals, which can often be late, understocked, and expensive. A sustainable hive is also a more resilient hive, as bees will be able to develop immunities to pests and diseases. Rented hives are unable to develop such immunities and to adapt to their environments due to constant migration. They're only in a single location for a month or so and cannot form any significant relationship to their ecosystem. Almond trees are currently growing without any surrounding vegetation, and it is common policy to remove all other plant life before growing the crop. Our alternative, which we put to Blue Diamond, is that growers could cultivate low-lying meadow flowers instead of ripping up almond trees and planting wildflowers in their stead. Using our seed packets, we suggest planting integrated Californian local species such as the Californian poppy, the phacelia, the medalia, and the lupine. This would provide foraging opportunities for maintained hives while also reintroducing endemic species to the area. This would also help support other insects, such as the hoverfly, the ground beetle, and the few species of wild bees native to North America, which are better suited to almond pollination. Natural predators of pests such as the wasp will also be reintroduced, cutting the need to use neonicotinoids. Already around the world, wildflowers are being planted across farmland by the Centre for Hydrology and Ecology, which has been shown to reduce pest numbers and, according to the Institute for Biological Sciences, could even increase crop yields.
As mentioned previously by my colleague, another of the significant contributors to colony collapse disorder is predation on the bee by the Varroa mite, otherwise known as Varroa destructor. Varroa mites can only breed inside honeybee hives, and they latch onto the bee's body, sucking the fat from it, which creates a picture that is unfortunate, but as we argue, preventable. Now, most almond farmers rely on chemical pesticides in order to combat Varroa mites, placing the pesticides directly inside the beehive. However, studies are clear that bees are also vulnerable to this type of pesticide, making this form of protection a double-edged sword. That is why we have crafted a mechanism called the rosea tunnel. The rosea tunnel uses a fungus that is organic and bee-friendly called Clonostoches rosea, which attacks Varroa mites without harming bees. Clonostoches rosea has the added benefit of attacking gray mold, which grows on almond trees and is a significant contributor to disease in the almond tree. We offer the rosea tunnel, which is a tunnel-shaped box that is lined with a powder containing Clonostoches rosea. Bees can, when leaving and entering the hive, be coated in the powder and can, when they pollinate almond trees, deliver the powder to almonds, protecting them from gray mold. This treats bees as a natural pest management solution and deliverer, which protects pollinators as well as the crops. Additionally, there are several legal incentives to adopt APIS, which fall under the 2014 Farm Act. For instance, the Conservation Activity Plan and the California Fish and Wildlife Fund are federal incentives for those farmers who wish to create, improve, or enhance wildlife and biodiversity on and around their farms and ranches. The Conservation Stewardship Program offers funds to farmers in proportion to their conservation outcomes on the individual farm. The more beneficial your conservation practices are, the more you receive. Finally, the Organic Certification Cost Share Program offers up to $11.5 million in total for those farms that are wishing to become organically certified, which APIS will make Blue Diamond's farms eligible for.
So how financially viable is the implementation of APIS for Blue Diamond growers? Well, Blue Diamond Growers is the largest grower cooperative in the world. 3,500 Blue Diamond farms contain around 122,500 acres of almond trees. It's around 35 acres per farm. We've done an approximate cost analysis to show you the benefit that each individual farm will receive. We believe that APIS is a saving for Blue Diamond growers. Currently, per acre, farmers usually pay around $400 for 2.5 hives. The initial cost plan for APIS would exceed that by $61. That's installing hives, colonies, contributing to beekeeper salaries. We believe that we'll need around 300 to service the entirety of Blue Diamond growers, seeds, the rosea tunnel, and any additional expenditure that's required. Now, although that's $61 more, you can see over 5 years the cost decreases dramatically, as farmers will only need to pay the extra expenditure and beekeeper costs. Rented hives, we've accounted for inflation here, but we haven't actually done any increase in the rental costs, which will continue to rise. You can see that in the first year the costs are $1,970 more. However, in years 2 to 5, this drops dramatically. The overall cost analysis for all of Blue Diamond's farms mean that They will save around $144 million in rental fees. Over 10 years, that rises to around $240 million. We would like to achieve a cost drop for the almond per pound if we can decrease, through the overhead savings that we've shown here by APIS, the cost of the almond by around 5 cents per pound. That would translate to a saving of around $11 million per year.
Now, as we've mentioned before, colony collapse disorder at 2008 was at 30% of the population overall of managed bees. That rose to 44% in 2017. If trends continue as they have, with a 1.5 increase per year, then within the next 10 years, there will be 66% of colony collapse disorder. And within the next 20 years, there will be 99%, which means that in the next 30 years, it is very likely that the beehive rental system, as it exists now, will be entirely obsolete. However, even if this is not the case, and even if the fee for renting a single beehive does not increase whatsoever from its current point, which is drastically unlikely, you can still see the savings over time that are reflected by adopting APIS. Now, considering the long-term economic implications for pollination management choices is significant, because there is a tendency in American agricultural systems to prefer short-term solutions without considering the long-term consequences of these choices. Blue Diamond has an obligation to its employees and other stakeholders to provide for the future of the company, ensuring that its business model is viable, not just within the next several years, but within the next several decades to come and well into the future. The organic movement provides some powerful context as well for adopting APIS. As mentioned previously, there is an increasing concern for where our food comes from and how it is produced. Organics are no longer a niche market. Rather, they have been integrated into mainstream consumer behavior. Blue Diamond has an opportunity to increase consumer trust in and reliance on its product. Willingness to pay is relevant here, as consumers have demonstrated, according to a study in 2015, a willingness to pay between 51 and 74 cents more per liter of food in exchange for it being pollinated organically and natively. So, for instance, the native and Californian organic honeybee managed populations that APIS would offer. If adopting APIS, Blue Diamond would be able to charge at least 50 cents more per liter of almonds, and that's not even considering the organic certification in addition that APIS would allow. Furthermore, farmers themselves demonstrate a willingness to pay significantly more per acre of land in order to reduce environmental risks, specifically those associated with insecticide use, up to $27. Now, as we've demonstrated, APIS would actually be a savings for farmers. However, this willingness indicates a growing consensus and a willingness to change and adopt more sustainable solutions for growing problems.
So what are some of the immediate benefits for Blue Diamond growers to adopt APIS? We've already demonstrated a powerful economic rationale for the growers and the company itself. However, we believe there would be an expansion of the consumer base, as Blue Diamond could advertise more to the ethically minded customer. Any return of investment from Blue Diamond would quickly be matched, as it would be the leading organic almond producer in the world. Blue Diamond could also diversify its products. The 305,000 beehives that would be on Blue Diamond farms would produce around 6 million pounds of honey per year. It's about $18 million in extra income. So Blue Diamond could even diversify to creating its own honey brand. As the bees in the system of APIS continue to grow and flourish, any excess which Blue Diamond doesn't need could be sold to other organic farms in California. In a sense, Blue Diamond could then become a bee provider in the state of California. With the 4,000 trucks traveling around 11,000 miles to deliver bees being cut, this would significantly decrease the CO2 emissions each year. The goal is really to cultivate a healthy biosphere immediately for California and Blue Diamond.
Having discussed the immediate benefits of adopting APIS, There are also some alternative possible futures to consider, which are already being realized in some parts of the world. Here in China, you see crops that need human pollination in order to survive because the bees have gone. Considering the amount of human labor it would take to pollinate a single almond farm, and considering further that Blue Diamond services 3,500 almond farms, this is a daunting prospect. Moreover, there are not enough humans in the world to pollinate all of the crops that need pollination services. Blue Diamond needs to consider whether this is a future it wants to realize. Up to this point, the current trend and policy in the almond industry regarding pollination management services has been one of inaction, driven perhaps by a hope that current trends would reverse themselves or that bee decline would not speed up, even under the current system. However, Blue Diamond is fast approaching a point from which there can be no safe return. Blue Diamond is at a crossroads. It can either step aside for another corporation to emerge as a leader in sustainable solutions, or it can choose to be the leader, creating resilient, ethical, and sustainable management practices to become an example for the rest of the world to follow.
Blue Diamond states on its website that it is committed to the long-term viability of the resources that farmers need to sustain their livelihoods. We know that with the implementation of IBECC, Blue Diamond can realise this commitment. Our goal is to have the creation of self-sufficient, resilient farms with managed hives. Blue Diamond will be able to fulfil its ethical obligations to all its stakeholders and the environment. From an ethical, legal, financial perspective, the future of Blue Diamond's bees is a future that's worth investing in. We thank you for listening and we'll welcome any questions.
I just have a question about what I thought I heard, but probably mistakenly. Did you say that Blue Diamond employs 900 people?
Yes.
That seems so small.
Yes. So in order to pollinate crops, most of the work that's done is actually by bees.
Yes.
However, certainly some employees are needed to maintain almond farms, to plant seeds, etc. I can understand how that might seem a small number given, but that's also one of the reasons that IBECC is great, because it's not going to exorbitantly change the number of needed employees in order to accomplish the same. So luckily for Blue Diamond, if they adopt IBECC, ecosystems do tend to run themselves. So.
Questions from?
I appreciated your presentation. Thank you for showing us all the different dynamics and perspectives that we can consider as the board of directors. I was kind of thinking back on some of our competitors that are in the industry. So Almond Joy, or others, and I'm curious to know what their board of directors are doing in consideration for this dilemma that seems to be plaguing the industry.
Well, actually, the almond industry in itself relies on quite short-term vision. So different companies have tried small measures. For example, one almond company tried to domesticate other local species to see if they could be adapted. The problem is, and the problem with any initiative that's been taken, is it's not a multi-tiered solution. The problem is you can't just start keeping your own hives because there's no wildflowers around. You have to be able to commit fully to the solution for it to maintain itself. So other competitors, they are worried, as they have been demonstrated by trying different alternatives like the domestication of local bees. But you need to fully commit to the whole ecosystem, basically, and that's not something in the short term which they've actually considered, because they base it sort of crops are yearly, so it's something which they care about on a short-term basis.
Right. It seems that the current process, the way that we're moving forward right now, is like a well-oiled machine in how we create our products. And although this APIS seems incredibly compelling and creative, I'd imagine there would be a good amount of downtime if we were to completely commit to a brand new system. Have you been able to think about what that downtime would be if we were to do a complete stop and switch, or versus a small pilot in a certain group? And then do you have any recommendations around where we could start in California?
So what's great about the 5-year analysis is we've done it so you can see initially if it was to be done in the first year. However, you could spread that over 5 years. You could implement APIS on 20% of your farm, and then you could grow it to its 100% after 5 years. What's great about the almond trees, it's only pollinated for 2 weeks a year. So in the off season, you could start implementing this system. And apart from sort of the logistical elements of putting in the hives, yes, you'd have plenty of time to be able to implement it.
I just had one more question for you.
Sure.
You had mentioned that we would be able to expand our customer base to bring in other customers who are interested in having organic foods. Have you done a measurement on approximately how much additional market space that would be? Obviously there is a market, but do you know how many more consumers approximately that would add to our consumer base?
No, even just the vegetarian market is growing at around 14% a year. So the organic market is much larger than that because of the organic meat. So it's much more than a 14% increase. It could arguably up to 25% or more. So it is significant.
And vegetarians already do rely on almonds as a meat substitute product as well, very commonly. So they already have a keen eye for which providers are making sustainable, ethical solutions. And there's an opportunity here for increased trust, as well as we demonstrated, a willingness to pay from those. People are willing to vote with their dollar and invest in products that they know they can sort of ethically trust and feel good about their consumption of.
Great, thank you.
For me, guys, it was very informative. I really enjoyed the topic. One of my questions is, say if you're the board of directors, in the immediate, when we start the process with APIS, how is it going to affect our bottom line?
Well, as the corporation, it's the amount of farmers you've got. It's the individual farmer would almost not bear the brunt because it could be done over 5 years and made space for, which is fine. So actually, it wouldn't particularly affect your bottom line. You make around $450 million per year. And we know Blue Diamond already have done small loans to growers just to implement water management systems. So actually, you can see over 5 years, it wouldn't particularly affect it. It would cost, I think it's $61 million to implement APIS, $49 million for rented hives. So you could potentially, even if all the farms couldn't just contribute it themselves, which we've already demonstrated through the water management system they could, you could probably be, if it was all initiated in the first year, which it's potentially could be, you could probably be 10 million in loans down. However, you can easily see over 5 years that would come back straight to you.
And over 5 years, the discrepancy in sales between Blue Diamond's bottom line and its competitors would be significant, because in terms of competitors, most almond industry practices sort of rely on, if you see on their websites, they'll talk about cutting back on insecticide use or cutting back on these practices. So a policy of doing less bad. However, APIS adopts a policy of doing more good, so taking proactive choices in management. And what this means is that those corporations who choose to use, say, neonicotinoid insecticides, the beehive rental system that currently exists, are going to see dramatic losses in their bees over time, which means that their bottom line is inevitably going to suffer. Almonds cannot survive without pollination, and the pollinators are disappearing.
Right.
This is not a well-formulated question, but I'm concerned about our shareholders, and is it possible to argue in this case that that market forces are in place already to self-regulate this problem on the grounds that the prices for the rental are going to be going up and up and up if I saw your graph, and it's going to become uneconomical
to do it
to use the rental approach. And at some point the argument on the part of a board like ours is going to be this was not sustainable financially, never mind ecologically. And is that your belief? I mean, is that your...
Oh, 100%. We're coming at you with a solution that is almost as well thought out as it is. It's something which you have to adopt over the next the next 20 years, as my colleague said. It's about 99% colony collapse.
Right.
So it can't be maintained. So we've tried to make the cost analysis as minimal in any sort of decrease as possible, just so you can tell your shareholders that we are doing this. In 5 years, it will be more than profitable.
Right. But if we took into account how beehive rental prices are going to continue to skyrocket as they have, as healthy bees become a more valuable commodity with their scarcity, the discrepancies that already existed on the graphs would be far larger, even than they exist now.
Right. Well, as you've been consulting with us, you probably already know that there's 5 or 6 other initiatives that are high priority for the board of directors. What is your stance on how we would reprioritize or deprioritize other initiatives that have equal or similar ethical?
I mean, take for example the water issue with almonds. You are already making good progress in different fields that you really need to make progress in. The one that you aren't is bee management, and like we've said, 5 years isn't actually a long period of time. So you can prioritise as you see fit. Really, you've already made a headway in other issues. So we say that this is a massive priority, and with the commitment, in 5 years it'll more than pay for itself.
Further to that, after the 5 years, the actual profits that you make from implementing APIS can be used to combat these other problems like drought.
Yes. Okay. Great. I think I'm fine with my questions. Do you have any? You, sir?
I have any more questions?
No?
Okay, well then we have potentially 9 minutes more of questions. So I'm trying to think of some really tough ones.
I know.
But I think it's been a very thorough presentation, and we appreciate it. So why don't we stop there with our
Stop being a board.
character questions, and then just see what comments the judges might have about your presentation as a whole. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good. All right.
So first off, yay!
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed the topic. Very well researched and presented. And I am delighted to see that this topic is something that you chose, because it is a huge problem, and something that I had shared earlier is something that's been on my mind too, as someone who's conscious about these trends in our society. So I thought it was very well presented. I thought each of you brought forth your various personalities and how you present with authenticity and genuine care, which came across. Maybe volume up a little bit with your voices, but it felt very natural and very engaging and very thorough, and so that's one of the reasons why, quite honestly, I didn't have very many tough questions, because I felt like it was very well planned in the way that you presented the information. So great job.
Yeah, guys, I mean, it's not an easy topic to go with the bees topic, but you guys, and for me personally, like, I knew it was a little bit of a problem, but not this big, on such a big scale. So realizing this and how it would affect other crops, other places, it's eye-opening pretty much. But very well done.
Thank you.
One of the virtues of your presentation, I think, is that you anticipated a lot of questions. It's not an accident that we didn't have.
Yeah, I really didn't have either.
You were proactive on that front, and I think that's a real kudo for you. I agree that it would have been a little bit nicer to have a little more volume.
Energy
Because I
volume,
was
yeah.
straining once in a while to make sure I heard every word. And and that could mean possibly include slowing down a little bit.
Sure.
You're not under the gun. You had extra time at the end, a few minutes, so you don't have to feel rushed, and it might improve the clarity. And now tomorrow you'll be doing the 10-minute presentation and the 90-second. It'd be amazing to hear you do this in 90 seconds. But, you're going to have to emphasize the ethical dimensions head on, and that's a very important piece of this puzzle. So good luck to you on that. I didn't pick up on your British accent.
I'm from Seattle. That's where I picked one. Yeah, I couldn't pick one. So.
It was very nicely done. And I'm trying to think of improvements that you could make. What would besides the ones that have already been mentioned, and there aren't too many.
I would just say use your energy, use the room, move around a little bit, engage the audience, and use your hands, use gestures, toning of voice. I think APES is a really creative idea, and it was very well thought out. Show that enthusiasm when you're like, and guess what, board of directors, we have this awesome idea, and just kind of, you're doing a little bit of selling, as consultants, and so I
You're
think,
not just consultants, you're salespeople.
yes, absolutely. The heart of a consultant is trying to influence informally and informally. And so I think a little bit of just showing your enthusiasm. It's a very academic subject, and so the way to keep it engaging, I would say, especially across 10 minutes or a short time, is really just use your natural passion, I think, for the topic.
In terms of the ethics of the presentation, if you don't mind if I ask a question
Not at
back
all.
to you guys.
Please,
did you feel that there were any sort of holes? Did we make the case for why you should care about this? Just thinking ahead to the 90-second and the 10-minute as well.
If there was anything that I thought could benefit from a little more explicitness, it was the ethical part. Make clear what framework you're coming from, rather than just it feels unethical or something. I mean, you don't have to get technical for sure, but you can talk in terms of the common good. You can talk in terms of the dangers to the ecosystem and ultimately to humankind. And you can talk about property rights and their limits. You can talk about, there are ways of sort of organizing the ethical perspectives so that the listener really gets it, that this is what the moral point of view would call for. And the different teams do this in different ways. Some teams use this 4-part ethical analysis thing: interest, rights, duties, virtues. But there are a ton of other ways to cut that up. And but I think if you're a little more explicit about the framework that you're bringing to this, and it's really a matter of circumspection on your part. You've already brought the ethical point of view to bear. The question is, are your listeners going to appreciate that?
So perhaps emphasizing some more of the 4 pillars you were mentioning, so such as like fairness, justice,
Yes.
harm, those
Right.
could be made more explicit to
I would say so. I
Right.
mean, just what is it to bring to bear an ethical perspective on this topic?
yeah.
Well, you got to consider this, that, and the other thing. Okay, and that way your listener is gonna tune in
Yeah.
to your analysis a little more, and they won't have to get ethics through osmosis.
Sure.
If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Sure.
I'd say the one area for me that maybe would have convinced me slightly more is the sense of urgency to implement. It's clear that this is a needed problem, but if I was a board of directors, honestly, and I'm like, I'll do this in 5 years or 3 years, the bees are hanging in there. You know, I get that that's not a heartful way of thinking about it, but oftentimes that's how corporations do things sometimes, and so maybe just kind of emphasizing the sense of urgency that you could take 20 years, you could take 5 years, you could take 1 year.
Yeah.
But the urgency is to really consider this, and that's why I asked that priority question around,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, water and other things. So,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I really identify with that
Yeah.
point. It's you've scared us.
oh, you scared us.
Good.
too.
That's always
But like, do
part
I
of
need
what
to do it
you're
like
trying to
today,
do.
or
Yeah.
do I need to do
Yeah.
it like, can I do this in 10
Yeah.
years? You know?
Yeah.
We're all invested in
I don't know how long I'm going to be on this board, but you scared me enough to think that I might be around
Yeah.
when this happens.
Right.
And that would not be something I'd want my grandchildren to be
No, absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
aware of.
Or even represent as a board member. That would be awful. So,
That's great.
I kind of had another question. In terms of Blue Diamond, have they considered possibly raising their own sustainable bee farms or anything like that?
Okay, so currently, you know how I briefly mentioned the websites of almond growers sort of make these gestures toward cutting back on unsustainable uses and trying to adopt more proactive stances. And there's always a very pretty picture of some farmers who are enjoying themselves. But at this point, no, it's not enough. And that urgency that you talked about, you know, in terms of priorities, there is no higher priority. If we value human populations, if we value ourselves, let alone other ecosystems and animals in the world,
Sure.
This is not something that we can put on the back burner, you know? So in terms of Blue Diamond and what it's doing right now, the answer is not what it needs to be doing.
and their competitors, like, I think Almond Joy is a competitor, but
So they are. I mean, what's amazing is Blue Diamond implementing ABIS isn't going to change. Isn't going to make bee populations just come back to life. But it's them doing that not only will save the money, it will mean that they're the leader and they can then demonstrate the entirety of California and for farming around the world that it can be done.
Yeah.
You know, and the money is there to prove it as well. So it's beneficial on many sides for them to actually like implement the system.
yeah. I think unfortunately with some of these older systems, whether it's farming or managing water and stuff, it's just been done for so many
That's it,
generations
yeah.
a certain
That's it.
way.
It's-
It really is change management if
Yeah.
you think about it.
Yeah.
And so although all of it intuitively makes sense and even numbers wise makes sense, it's getting generations of farmers to do something differently. I think that could also be an influential
I mean,
piece.
CCD, which was the real spearhead of the colony collapse, they actually sort of thought, well, it must just be one thing causing it. And actually, it's all the problems to do with modern farming. So it's almost the beehives telling the farmers and sort of agriculture that it can't be done this way.
Right.
So it's actually just nature demonstrated to you, in 2006 that we can't keep going like this. So it needs to be addressed. And that was 2006. It's over 10 years ago. Still nothing's been changed.
That's what I'm
by it,
saying.
you know.
Like in my mind, I'm thinking they heard that in 2006
Yeah.
and they said, "I've got 20 years. I'll get back to this."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of going back to that urgency thing again about,
Yeah.
and maybe the change management human aspect of it to say, you as board of directors have formal influence over the way
Absolutely,
your
yeah.
decisions are made.
Certainly.
And so I'm sure you have org development department. I have an OD background, so go work with your OD department or go work with your change manager, whomever, and make this key messaging, something that is coming from top down.
Definitely. And I think you make a really good point about entrenched behaviors in the agricultural sector. And studies show that if you rely completely on apocalyptic rhetoric, so like, the bees are dying, you better do something, people actually shy away from that. So you have to say, all right, here's the problem, but we have a solution, and it's not too late. There are ways for you to proactively be the leader. And for Blue Diamond, which is the largest almond grower in the world, just what a reaction from the rest of the world if they did make that choice to go organic, and like what would the implications be globally. I find them really exciting.
I do too. When you showed that image of in China, was it the farmer who was that was very impactful for me when I saw that view. And so
I mean, like Helen said, it's even the amount of almond trees and the amount of crops that need it. There aren't even enough humans to do it. So not only the difficulties and how arduous it is to actually do it, there aren't even enough people to do it for the entirety. So it's quite scary.
And is it that
future?
The majority of the almond trees are in California because of our climate?
Yeah, so the climate is suited to growing almond trees, but as you know, there have been problems with drought and such things recently. But the trouble is, they're not endemic to California, which is why we have to ship all of these. Well, we don't have to, as we argued, but people traditionally have been shipping just truckloads of bees from Florida all across the country, like from coast to coast, essentially, because they just don't exist where they're needed.
Yeah, it's almost like some farmer was like, well, we'll just truck them from here to there, put a Band-Aid on the solution, and not realize that what it's doing. But I thought the tunnel thing was also really creative. So they truly be coated with this powder enough for it to...
It's on them, in the first, it's just as, obviously, when they pick up pollen,
the fibers,
it goes on the fibers of their body, so it's just the same.
That's so creative.
It's completely natural, so they'd just be moving out of the hive as they normally would.
That?
Right. And actually, I don't know if we can overstress this, but like varroa mites are awful for bee populations.
Sounds like it.
Like they are one of the top contributors, and so this was something that we really wanted to integrate in our solution, showing that yes, spread of disease, yes, toxic pesticides, but then there's this natural predator that is also completely hurting bees. So we needed to create an organic solution that wouldn't continue that sort of spiral of toxicity.
I can't turn the clock back to the place where we're in our roles. One of the questions I would have is, are there potential side effects, as we know from environmental studies for 50 years now? You can't do just one thing. And is it possible that this tunnel might have side effects on the lives of those bees besides the intended effect of getting rid of the mites? Causing problems within the hive or
surrounding plants.
Ingesting the powder.
So the great thing about Clonostoches rosea is that it is mild enough that it only attacks parasitic mites such as ticks and varroa mites. So it won't have, for instance, any toxic effect on the bee or on any other say insects or small animals that are going to be in the ecosystem. Moreover, in those almond farms, the only thing it would be toxic to is gray mold, which is another thing that almond farmers have to deal with all the time. Outbreaks, looks ugly, decreases their crops. And so this would be an organic and pretty safe solution for not just bees, but the ecosystems that APIS would be trying to build around almond farms as well.
Further to that as well, because it's a sort of a multi-tiered solution long term, you could probably see the effect of using it less. Varroa mites are particularly bad because of the way they're trucked. Then they spread really quickly around bees that are sort of mass kept in sort of confinement. So you'd actually find that with the biosphere sort of regenerating itself, it's potentially over long term you could start using it less and less. the powder
Has it
itself.
been tested?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, so there are scientific studies to say that it's
Yeah.
sufficient.
Is that how you'll find it?
That's how we found it. Yes.
Do the research.
We saw in a scientific journal, it's like, we found it!
Yeah.
How interesting. Is it cheap and easy to pay for?
Yeah, that's the
and
thing. So it's like,
find?
it's a fungus. It's in the world. So you can't really, there's no one who can tell you that you can't use it, right? And
Yeah.
also using pollinators as a natural pesticide delivery service is something that's like not really availed of enough, I would argue, because bees naturally will go from plant to plant. So it's sort of like, if you find this powder that's safe for them and harmful to all of these stressors that hurt bees,
Right.
why not? I mean, why aren't they doing it?
Is the powder easy to find though? Like, would they have to all of a sudden have like a farm of for just for the powder to make enough powder for this? You know
Yeah,
what
I
Is it
mean,
easy to
it's
find? Is
the
it-
same with any. You could
Any
produce
fungus?
it. You could produce it
Okay.
en masse. Yeah, it's relatively
We
easy.
need to wind down.
sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
That's very
This is
interesting.
fun. We'll do it over lunch. One aspect of the ethical dimension here that has been occurring to me as the judges have been asking you questions and myself is we have a fiduciary duty as board members to the future of the company. And so it's not just the ethics of the problem and how to solve it.
Yeah.
It's the ethics of the board.
Completely.
Yeah.
And you got to find a gentle way to communicate that
Yeah.
so we don't feel too defensive.
Yes,
But the
yeah.
truth is that given the time frame, the urgency point,
Right.
and our role as custodians of the future of this company, that's an ethics issue.
Yeah.
Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
I think
Nice
we-
job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time and your
Yeah.
questions. Thank you.
I think I said it last year as well, but y'all need to start patenting your ideas because they're very creative.
We actually published in a journal the one from last